If a name that you really want is already taken, use tools like whois.domaintools.com to find out who the registered owner of a name is, and you can use that info to make them an offer for it. Although many times, the better domain names are worth many thousands of dollars, even if the site itself has no value. Use of hyphens and careful and clever use of synonyms and dictionaries could also be of invaluable use in the brainstorming phases of such difficult but vital efforts. But we can't imagine trying to find a domain name without taking advantage of the suggestion wizards like Register.com and Nameboy.com offer. They get keywords from you, your name, and your location, and then they offer hundreds of available options that they think might tickle your fancy. Often that's all they tickle, but even then they can lead to that sudden moment of lucidity when the perfect name slams into your mind, and then you have only to see if it's still available. Despite our description of how simple it is to get a domain name, we can't stress just how important it is that you don't leap at the first available opening. Be certain that you've thought out all the permutations and you've exhausted all of the better options as being not available before committing to a name that might be hard to remember, might be difficult to type, or just too busy for a user to want to type it in more than once. A domain name like God.com, for instance, is clearly going to be a site about God, while a site named ChristianStuff.net might not have anything to do with God, Christianity, or even religion, and most people would reason that out from the name itself. So for this reason, you don't want to pick a name that has little to no bearing on the goods or services that you intend to market. Since we're focusing on ClickBank products for your 8 Days to Cash business venture, how-to books and info should be the keywords you focus on. So a domain name like KnowledgeSeller.com or KnowledgeSeller.info, where you focus on supplying info with links to related ClickBank landing sites for available products at various points, would be a super domain to own. Choosing a registrar. If choosing the name is important, then selecting a site to receive it or host it is a close second. One of our personal favorites, due to fair pricing, host of free tools, and wide range of available options, is Register.com. But the following list, who barely touches the surface of the available registrars, all have their benefits. GoDaddy.com, Nameboy.com, NetworkSolutions.com, Register.com, and WebsitePalace.com. Many links and articles talk about the skills and techniques necessary to find and reserve a good domain name, but really it boils down to being patient, using the tools that are available, and waiting to find just the right name for your needs. If, for instance, you love the domain name exquisite-writing.com, but it's taken, try variations around the same thing, like writing-excellence.com or excellent-writing.com, and all of the derivatives like .net and .org. If you find a domain name that you really like but you just aren't certain if it's it, well, go ahead and reserve it for the yearly fee, but then keep searching for that perfect name. That way, the name's not snatched out from under you while you do your search, and you'll only be out $20 or $30 or so, less if you go with a discount domain registrar like Website Palace or Nameboy. Some good articles and info about domain naming techniques can be found at some of these sites: internic.net, wikipedia.org, checkdomain.com. Visit these sites and get some valuable info today. Sell yourself, or what you know. In the normal business world, the key is location. Online, it's supposedly your domain name and the click-through rate, CTR, of your advertisements. But you know what's really the most important key to success, whether you're selling a product in a regular store or online? Knowing what your strengths are and using those strengths in the best manner possible. If you can write program code like there's no tomorrow, then selling software and custom tailoring it for a fee makes excellent sense. On the other hand, if you can manage software developers and have great people skills, then hiring one of those and establishing the same business could also work. But if you're a perfectionist who can't stand to ship or sell a product unless it's beyond reproach, and you hate to change something once it meets your vision of excellence, well, software is certainly not the field for you. Business courses in college teach skills, but if you don't have an aptitude, then even if you have the skills, you might not enjoy the task. And if you don't enjoy something, you won't do as well at it as if you enjoy it and have the skills. You can learn how to handle receiving and accounts payable, or how to manage refunds and security, and how to market your products and so forth. But do you know if you actually enjoy those tasks? Or are you even the type of person who's any good at them? How to ascertain your aptitudes. For many years, aptitude tests have existed that help you determine your personality profile, your tendencies, and your mental ability. Strangely enough, few people seek out such tests to learn their IQ and what interests them. They just blindly choose career paths and goals in life based on what appears to them to be the current hot trend. Then they wonder why they're stuck in dead-end jobs that they hate, surrounded by people who don't appreciate what they're capable of. There's nothing more important when a person is either starting out or changing their career path than taking a personality and a career self-assessment. After all, as the old saying goes, you can't fix what you don't know is broke. And perhaps even more importantly, you can't take advantage of a skill that you didn't know was rare or exceptional. Mumbo-jumbo science. Some people believe that psychology and any study of human characteristics is all mumbo-jumbo and doesn't apply to them because everyone's different and unique. But just because you are different, you're just like everybody else, and that doesn't mean that certain characteristics and laws of physics don't also apply to you. Anybody who's given a fair shake to a quality assessment test must admit that 80 to 90% of the report fits them to a T. And the scary part is that the other 10 to 20% might be just as fitting, we just don't want to acknowledge it. The modern assessments are all based on two basic methods, the Myers-Briggs and the Keirsey. The purpose behind the Myers-Briggs assessment was to create a way to express the theory of Jung's psychological types in a manner that's understandable and useful for everyday laymen. Jung believed that much of the seemingly random behavior was really the result of ordered and consistent values interpreted by the filters of perception and judgment. Since a blind man simply can't see and deaf people cannot hear, although they learn of those concepts, they'll never be able to utilize or understand the nuances of those senses that someone who has them will. Jung believed that different people could come to different conclusions, and Isabel Briggs Myers and her mother, Catherine Briggs, decided to take these insights and create a chart of various types of filters that most people do have, and place a structured test that would measure those filters to determine what personality types a different person may have. The resultant Myers-Briggs Type Indicator, or MBTI, has since proven highly effective in identifying the four dichotomies specified and implicit in Jung's theory. From their findings, they discovered that there are essentially 16 unique personality types that most folks fall into. By asking questions such as the following from the MBTI manual, they can, provided the person answers truthfully, ascertain which of the 16 categories that person falls into with an amazing degree of success. Sample questions include, do you prefer to focus on the outer world or your own inner world? Do you prefer to focus on basic information observation, or do you prefer to interpret and add meaning? When making decisions, do you first look at logic and consistency, or at the people and the special circumstances? And in dealing with the outside world, do you prefer to get things decided or to stay open to new info and options? Honest answers to these questions will help to determine your personality type, which is then identified by a 4-letter personality type code. All of these are detailed in the MBTI manual. A related exam, called the Keirsey Temperament Assessment, was created after David Keirsey was introduced to the MBTI test, and he noted that, while useful and accurate, it really did not quite cover all of the human condition, in that, while detailing the type of intellectual methods and insights a person might have, it didn't really indicate what type of person that individual might be. While closely related to the MBTI, there are some major differences between the two questionnaires, and the results of them are best taken together to get a full and accurate assessment of a person. Like Myers-Briggs, Keirsey stood on the shoulders of giants, only rather than Jung, he traced his concept back to the ancient Greek Hippocrates, who proposed the concept of 4 humors or temperaments, which he called sanguine, choleric, phlegmatic, and melancholic. Published in his groundbreaking 1978 book, Please Understand Me, he found that combining sensing with perceiving and intuition with judging, the results were very similar to the aforementioned 4 humors, and to make the concept more understandable and useful, he renamed the humors to artisan, idealist, rational, and guardian when he published Portraits of Temperament in 1987. Keirsey believed that everyone can be both observant and introspective. When physically sensing the world through touch, taste, or smell, they're observant, but when they reflect or pay attention to thoughts, they're introspective. He further felt that you cannot do both at the same time, and that the degree to which people switch back and forth, called multitasking, has a direct effect on their behavior. In his assessment, he breaks down the personalities not into 16 distinct types, but into 4 rings, or tendencies. Those who were more observant were more real or down-to-earth than those who were more abstract or otherworldly, and he found they tended to focus more on global issues. This was his sensing and intuition group, and Keirsey used different words like pragmatic or rational versus idealists, and cooperative or artisans rather than guardians. But the results were not at all in conflict with the MBTI. Rather, they seemed complementary, as one might expect. The 4 temperaments, as defined by Keirsey, were artisans. These are the observant and pragmatic types. Typically, composers, crafters, performers, and promoters are the role variants seen in this temperament. The greatest strength is seen as tactical variation, and the most developed intellectual skill is either expediting or improvising. Guardians, the most observant and cooperative types associated with protectors, inspectors, supervisors, and provider role variants. They typically seek membership or belonging and have strong feelings of responsibility and duty. Their strength is logistical intelligence, and they often excel at organizing, facilitating, checking, and supporting. Idealists are the introspective and cooperative, of which the role variants include the healers, the counselors, the champions, and the teachers. Seeking meaning and significance, they seek their own unique identity. Foremost is their diplomatic intelligence, and with it they excel at clarifying, unifying, individualizing, and inspiring. The rationals are the introspective and pragmatic ones, whose variants include architects, masterminds, inventors, and field marshals. They tend to seek control over themselves and others, and focus on their knowledge and competence. Their greatest strength is strategic intelligence, and they tend to excel at logical investigations such as engineering, conceptualizing, theorizing, and coordinating. The 8 roles. 8 roles were postulated in Keirsey's method, which he determined to be the following. Operators are observant, pragmatic, and directive. Crafters and promoters are the 2 role variants of the directive artisans. Entertainers are observant, pragmatic, and informative. Composers and performers are the 2 role variants of the informative artisans. Administrators are observant, cooperative, and directive. Inspectors and supervisors are the 2 role variants of the directive guardians. Conservators are observant, cooperative, and informative. Protectors and providers are the 2 role variants of the informative guardians. Mentors are introspective, cooperative, and directive. Counselors and teachers are the 2 role variants of directive idealists. Advocates are introspective, cooperative, and informative. Healers and champions are the 2 role variants of the informative idealists. Coordinators are introspective, pragmatic, and directive. Masterminds and field marshals are the 2 role variants of the directive rationals. Engineers are introspective, pragmatic, and informative. Architects and inventors are 2 role variants of the informative rationals. Comparing the MBTI and Keirsey temperaments. There are several key differences in the 2 methods, the biggest being that Myers was focused on how people think and feel, while Keirsey was more concerned with how they behave. This is reasonable since, as Keirsey noted, you cannot directly observe how a person thinks or feels, but you can watch their behavior and actions, and thus determine without relying on their potentially false input what their temperament really is. Another difference lies in the fact that Myers used a linear 4-factor model and Keirsey a field theory model in the descriptions intellectual versus real world, in other words. And of course, the 2 methods place different emphasis on different dichotomies and preferences. Both tests have value, and there's value in taking both tests and then comparing the results. Think of the MBTI as telling you who you think you are and want to be, and see the Keirsey as telling you what your actions say to the world that you are. Somewhere between the 2 lies the truth, what you are and who you are, and it's that information that's useful to you. Using these facts. So very interesting, you say. But what has any of this to do with my earning cash on the internet? Ha ha, grasshopper, if you only realized. Focusing on what you know best and what you're best suited to do is the surest way to success. while trying to work with and on things that you may have the skills to succeed at but that you find tedious, while not guaranteeing failure, can certainly contribute to it. We recommend taking these tests and then being sure that you focus your ClickBank site on articles and products that you can wholeheartedly support and enjoy, because that's what not only makes you rich, but makes you happy as well. Personality profiles. A short description of the Myers-Briggs and Keirsey methods can be found at developers.sun.com/toolkits/articles/desc.html. Career and self-assessment websites. One excellent, but not really free resource can be found at assessment.com. They have a wonderful and straightforward query tool to gather very detailed personality and skill data and place you with specific abilities and tendencies that can then be easily mapped to various jobs. A portion of the summary is available for free, with the full report available for $20, but the best choice is the $39 Job Seeker choice that also maps your skills and assessments to specific jobs and careers. A totally free and similar test provides you with the interest profiler scores without the depth or explanations, and that can be found at ioscar.org/tx/assessment/samenu.asp. And it also includes a work importance locator. This is similar in structure, and the 181 questions provide some fairly specific interest tendencies without any personality or skill-based insights. But it's very useful for obtaining scores that can be used to isolate job areas and the training required. You can find a free temperament assessment at 712educators.about.com and an interest profiler for free at ioscar.org/tx/ip/ipscore.asp. The interest profiler, by the way, shows jobs at which you would probably excel. Set for success. Choosing a business model. Business is a science, and fortunately, it's one that's been around so long that many books and websites exist to tell you all of the in-depth and dirty details. But it's not simple, and starting off wrong could lead to a very difficult and painful restart. So it's a good idea to consider carefully right up front just how big you could become and what business model you'll need in place then so that you can prepare it now. Of course, in this day and age, science is almost considered a religion all by itself. Dare to question what the high priests say, and you'll be shunned, or worse yet, excommunicated. But maybe we should just lighten up, because the barest fact of all is this. Business works this way. You have more than you need of something, and so does someone else. You both could use or want some of what the other has, and depending on who wants or needs the other's goods the most determines what kind of deal you'll work out. But the outcome is pretty much cut and dried. And that, my friend, is business in a nutshell. The rest of it's all just smoke and mirrors. Now, not that even in science there isn't room for smoke and mirrors. Just try having a laser light show without those. But as with anything, presentation is almost as important to success in business as in, say, love. How you dress up, clean up, and present yourself and your business is just as vital to how much success you'll actually have. So, in this section, let's discuss a few aspects of that. In particular, the traditional business model, that is, the physical and legal organization of your company, and the new business models now being touted, which are really just misplaced business plans that have been relabeled and moved into the business model category by paper pushers who can't seem to leave anything alone long enough for it to put down some roots. Just what is business? As we've talked before, business, at its heart, is really very simple. You get something for something else, and you hope to get something for nothing. That's probably the goal of any business transaction. Trade, or theft, if you will, is what business is all about. To put it in more modern terms, business is a company or organization that buys and sells goods, makes products, or provides services. Of course, if you can't do that and make a profit, you won't stay business very long, so there are a few more aspects to it than just those. If you believe in the Christian faith, then business is just as old as man himself, back to when Adam gave up a rib for what could arguably be the best business deal of all times, a woman who might have turned out to be a pain in his side, but she helped him start the human race as we know it and brought him much pleasure and company. On the other hand, if you're not of a religious nature, then it might interest you to know that thousands of years ago, women in Babylon ran their own businesses. And as far back as man has kept recorded history, the first documentation of business was of goods and events considered to be of value, like the number of animals slain by a particular hunter, or the number of jugs of wine given as a present to a lord. History has been full of businesses, and to figure out what works and what fails, and more importantly, why, all you must really do is study and then apply the underlying human elements to the current trends and products. You see, times and goods may change, but people don't. And that you can take to the bank. So, what is a business model? During the past decade, the concept of a business model has become very popular. And along with the advent of new types of businesses, thanks primarily to the internet, new models have had to be created. In 2002, researchers on the web found 107,000 references to the term. In 2004, that number was more than 2,130,000 references. But in the vast majority of these sites, an actual definition of what the term means is nowhere to be found. Despite the fact that choosing the correct model can make or break your business, and that so much conversation is done about it, most people just assume that you know and understand what a business model is. Simply put, a business model is a definition and a plan for the day-to-day management and structure of an organization. So to be effective, a business model must specify what is valuable about the business. It must identify what market segment is to be served. It must define the structure of the company in both revenue generation and management structure. And finally, it needs to state the strategy of the business. So in short, a business model is what a business plan defines and helps to create. But in more down-to-earth matters, you must also define what type of business structure you want the company to follow. That means making a decision even prior to creating the business plan. So for this aspect of a business model, we're referring to one of those types of legal structures that a commercial organization can choose. The three most common types of models in use today include these. The sole proprietorship. This is a typical one-person business that's registered just under your name, maybe without even having a separate tax ID, but just using your own social security number. If you ever take photographs, do some writing, or even mow lawns for money, then technically you own a sole proprietorship business. Problems with this type of business include the fact that you're personally liable for any debts or obligations or lawsuits. So for that reason, it might be best to consider a different business model for your online website. Corporation. Being a corporation means that you've set up your business as a legal entity independent from you and anyone else who owns or manages it. So this can complicate some things, since the corporation, not you, owns the assets and income, and you have to work within certain legal requirements, but it provides a buffer and protection from possible litigation and accrued business debt, and that more than makes up for any hassles of starting or running a corporation. Another important thing to know is that corporations don't end when an owner dies or sells the company. As an independent entity, it continues until it's disbanded. Limited liability company. LLCs are similar to corporations in that they provide personal liability protection and they share a very similar tax structure, but they're easier to run than a corporation. They are a bit more difficult to set up, but if you want simple day-to-day management and think that you might take on some partners someday, an LLC could be the way to go. If you don't deliberately choose, then you automatically choose sole proprietorship whether you want to or not. And as you can see, that does have its pros and its cons. But for the sake of our 8 Days to Cash program using ClickBank, it's a reasonable model. But bear in mind that an LLC is a better choice if you know up front that you'll be branching out and maybe plan to take on some partners someday. Here's some legal advice. I'm not big on paying others to do things that I can do just as well myself. But when it comes to setting up a business, I have found it's often worth a couple of hours of your lawyer's time to make sure that all the proper forms and requirements have been met. So if you're going to form an LLC or incorporate, It's almost a necessity to see a lawyer about at least some of the details. Otherwise, you could probably handle it on your own, but don't hesitate to take advantage of the online forums and discussion groups from other small business owners who have been where you're going. Better to ask around up front than to get stuck in a rut that everyone else knew about, but you didn't ask. The definition defined. The current technical definition of a business model is this: a conceptual tool defining various aspects of business and their relationships, allowing an expression of a business plan or outlook for a specific firm. Now, this might sound a lot like a business plan, and indeed, the two go hand in hand, or at least they should, one driving and reinforcing the other. But the part of the business model that is defined and very important is the physical and legal structure that the company undertakes in pursuit of earning its income, and that's not really a vital part of the business plan as such. The very concept of a business model is really fairly recent, becoming popular only in the late 1990s. This was due in large part to changes in the IT, telecom, and related high-tech industries that happened when costs dropped and new methods of handling data became so commonplace that entire industries began to flounder. They lost their way in what had seemed like a stable and long-term business venture. So naturally, for executives and managers who have to have buzzwords and ways to discuss simple things like what's our long-term strategy, a special term and policy had to be created to define and understand this difficult and all-important new finding, and thus the business model came to be. In spite of all of this, as far as you and I and 8 Days to Cash are concerned, the important thing about a business model is not the details you have written out in your business plan, how you structure your politics and long-term strategies and so forth, but the legal model that you choose to run your business. Having a firm business model and a steady business plan might just be the most useful thing for a new business that's just getting on its feet. It's absolutely imperative that new businesses establish proper avenues for things like customer feedback, self-management, guidelines for growth, and perhaps even most importantly, defined limits so that you know when and if it's time to pull out. Just a few years ago, remember that many of the dot-commers lost their millions finding out their business plans just didn't work and their businesses failed. Now, a few smart ones, like Mark Cuban, sold while still ahead of the game, and others, like Google, managed to correct themselves in their business plans and forge on to achieve greatness. But the vast majority shattered and fell like a crystal chandelier in a shooting range. I can't think of any better proof than that constantly updated business plans and clear business models are necessary for actual ongoing success. But look around and you see that most beginning businesses don't have, nor do they even believe in the need for a business plan, and they haven't considered whether their business models are even best for their growing businesses. But hey, when you start your 8 Days to Cash, you'll be planning ahead to the 9th day from day one, and when that day comes, you'll be smiling and picking up the pieces of the other guy's broken chandelier when you race past them and achieve success. Put your best face forward. In the last section, we mentioned just how important appearances can be and why you want to present a polished and professional appearance in order to make the best impression possible. So in this section, let's expand on that a bit with some actual examples of steps you can implement that will make others see you as a trustworthy and reliable source for the goods and services they need. Look successful, be successful. Now that's as true today as it ever was. And a huge portion of starting out right and being set for success in the online world is the look and the feel of your website. Not only will this be vital to your marketing success, but it says something about you, not just as a person, but as a business entity. Are you serious and dedicated? Or maybe just a little playful? Do you care more about content and getting your message across? Or do you share equally the concern of usability and aesthetics? Rest assured, customers will notice if you're just showing off with flashy presentations and animations that aren't really vital to your message, especially if they have to wait on them to download. Also, using non-standard fonts and unique approaches to layout may be fun the first time or two, but for repeat visitors, it's an annoyance. So, look successful In order to do that, your sites must be clean, they must download quickly, and they must be neat and orderly in appearance. Personal appearance. With an online business, your personal appearance will normally not be an issue. But let's talk about some facts that you really should be aware of anyway. Did you know, for instance, that when you first meet someone, they form an opinion of you within the first 30 seconds? And worse yet, the opinion they form never fully changes. You can modify it a little, change it or rectify it in their mind a little, but they'll always first remember their first summary of what they thought you were. Oh, and it gets worse. They don't just form an image of you. They create a whole list of suppositions based on that one impression, all in 30 seconds. In fact, studies have confirmed that the average person forms a tentative impression within 1/2 minute, including thoughts on someone's educational level, their career competence and success, their personality, level of sophistication, trustworthiness, sense of humor, and even social heritage.